The breaking point ambassador Sarah Chen adjusted her uniform one final time as she walked through the gleaming corridors of Harmony 7th, the massive diplomatic station that served as the heart of the Stellar Confederation. The walls were made of a translucent material that shifted colors based on the emotional state of nearby beings, and today they pulsed with an unsettling mix of orange frustration and deep purple resignation. Sarah had grown accustomed to these subtle changes over the past 14 months, but today felt different. Today, the colors seemed to mirror her own internal struggle. The diplomatic chamber ahead buzzed with activity, as representatives from 47 different species prepared for what Sarah suspected would be her final appearance before the Confederation Council. Her aide, Commander Marcus Torres, walked silently beside her, his expression carefully neutral despite the storm brewing behind his dark eyes. Marcus had served as her military liaison throughout these negotiations, and she knew he shared her growing frustration with the Council's treatment of humanity. As they entered the vast chamber, Sarah took in the familiar sight of the circular assembly. The architecture was designed to make no species feel superior to another, with each delegation seated at the same height and distance from the central speaking platform. In theory, it represented equality. In practice, Sarah had learned that some voices carried more weight than others, and humanity's voice had been consistently dismissed as the naive ramblings of a species too young to understand galactic politics. Prime Counselor Thixel rose from his crystalline seat, his body refracting the chamber's light into rainbow patterns across the walls. The Zethari were silicon-based beings who communicated through harmonic resonances, and when Thixel spoke, his words carried an almost musical quality that many species found soothing. Sarah had once found it beautiful. Now it reminded her of wind chimes in a graveyard. Ambassador Chen, Thixel intoned, his crystalline form shifting to a deeper blue hue that indicated formal address. We have reviewed humanity's latest proposal regarding the integration of your species' transportation networks with our established trade routes. While we appreciate your enthusiasm, the Council has determined that such rapid expansion would be inappropriate for a species with only 3 centuries of spaceflight experience. Defense Minister Korvac clicked his mandibles in what Sarah had learned was the Zerathi equivalent of dismissive laughter. The insectoid being's compound eyes fixed on her with an expression that somehow managed to be both predatory and contemptuous. Honored Prime Counselor, perhaps we should explain to our human friend why her species' offer is so quaint. The transportation networks they propose to enhance have been operating efficiently for over 2,000 years. The idea that beings who have barely left their home system could improve upon our methods is rather presumptuous. Trade Representative Zelia's gills fluttered with what Sarah recognized as barely contained amusement. The aquatic Nalori had a habit of making their disdain known through subtle biological cues, and Zelia had perfected the art of insulting others while maintaining a facade of diplomatic courtesy. Minister Korvac speaks wisely. However, we should not discourage our young friends entirely. Perhaps in another few centuries, when humanity has gained more experience in interstellar matters, we might revisit some of these proposals. After appropriate modifications, of course. Sarah felt her jaw tighten, but she maintained her diplomatic composure. She had presented detailed analyses showing how human hyperspace relay technology could reduce travel times by 30%, while increasing cargo capacity by nearly 50%. The economic benefits alone would have been worth trillions of credits annually, but the Council had dismissed her data without serious consideration, just as they had dismissed every human contribution for over a year. Honored Council members, Sarah began, her voice steady despite the anger building within her. I believe there may be some misunderstanding about the scope and effectiveness of human technological innovations. Our relay system has been tested extensively, and the results clearly demonstrate. Ambassador Chen, interrupted Counselor Vextrus, a serpentine being whose species prided itself on logical thinking. Your test results are based on simulations within your limited sphere of space. The Galactic Transportation Network operates on scales and complexities that humanity has never encountered. Your proposals, while well-intentioned, demonstrate a fundamental lack of understanding of the challenges involved in managing interstellar infrastructure. The chamber filled with subtle sounds of agreement from various species. Sarah noticed that several delegates had stopped paying attention entirely, engaging in private conversations or reviewing unrelated documents. Her species' concerns were so routinely dismissed that many council members no longer bothered to listen. Commander, Torres leaned forward slightly, his military bearing evident even in the diplomatic setting. Sarah could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands remained carefully flat on the table to avoid forming fists. She knew he was thinking about the classified reports in his possession, reports that would shock these arrogant beings if they knew the truth about human capabilities. Perhaps, suggested Counselor Thixel, his tone taking on a patronizing quality that made Sarah's teeth ache. Humanity would benefit from a more structured approach to galactic integration. The Council has discussed the possibility of establishing a mentorship program where more experienced species could guide human development. With proper supervision, your species might eventually contribute meaningfully to Confederation affairs. The word supervision hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach as she realized the full implications of what was being suggested. They weren't offering partnership, they were offering patronage. They wanted to treat humanity like children who needed adult guidance, despite the fact that human technology had already proven superior in multiple fields. Defense Minister Korvac's mandibles clicked again, and he tilted his head in a gesture that Sarah had learned indicated condescension. The mentorship program would, of course, require certain adjustments to human autonomy in specific areas. Military development, for instance, should be guided by species with more experience in galactic conflicts. The Zarathi would be honored to oversee human defensive capabilities. And economic development, added Trade Representative Zelia, her gills now fluttering with barely disguised avarice, should naturally fall under the guidance of species with established trade networks. The Nalori have extensive experience in managing developing economies. Sarah looked around the chamber and saw the truth written on every alien face. They weren't discussing partnership or even supervised development. They were discussing the systematic dismantling of human independence, the reduction of humanity to a client state dependent on the goodwill of species that viewed them as useful pets at best. The Council's generosity knows no bounds, Sarah said, her voice carrying a deceptive calm that made several nearby delegates look up with sudden interest. However, I believe there may be some fundamental misunderstandings about humanity's current capabilities and our expectations for this relationship. She stood up slowly, her movement deliberate and controlled. Commander Torres rose with her, his hand moving instinctively toward his sidearm before he caught himself and clasped his hands behind his back. For 14 months, Sarah continued, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics, the United Earth Federation has approached these negotiations in good faith. We have offered technological innovations, economic partnerships, and military cooperation. We have shared our scientific discoveries and opened our space to Confederation vessels. We have treated every member of this council with respect and dignity, even when that courtesy was not reciprocated. The chamber had grown noticeably quieter, with conversations trailing off as delegates began to pay attention to the human ambassador's words. There was something in her tone that suggested this was not going to be another routine presentation. We came here believing that the Stellar Confederation represented the best hope for peaceful cooperation among sapient species, Sarah said, her voice growing stronger with each word. We believed that diversity of thought and experience would be valued, that newer perspectives might complement ancient wisdom. We were wrong. Prime Counselor Thixel's crystalline form shifted to a warning shade of red. Ambassador Chen, perhaps you should consider your words carefully. The Council has shown remarkable patience with your species and experience in diplomatic matters. Sarah smiled, and something in that expression made several delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. Patience, yes, you've been very patient with us. Patient with our naive suggestions about improving your technology. Patient with our foolish offers of economic cooperation. Patient with our ridiculous proposals for military alliance. So patient, in fact, that you've decided we need supervision to prevent us from embarrassing ourselves further. She reached into her diplomatic case and withdrew a small device that looked like nothing more than an ornate paperweight. Several security officers around the chamber tensed, but Sarah made no threatening moves. "This device," she said, holding it up for all to see, "is connected to every human facility, every human ship, and every human citizen currently within Confederation space. It's a simple communication device, really. One button, one message, transmitted on a frequency that only human technology can detect." Defense Minister Korvac's compound eyes fixed on the device with sudden intensity. "Ambassador, what is the purpose of this demonstration?" "The purpose," Sarah replied, her finger hovering over the single button on the device, "is to implement Protocol Exodus. As of this moment, the United Earth Federation formally withdraws from all negotiations with the Stellar Confederation. We withdraw our technological assistance, our economic partnerships, and our military cooperation. We withdraw our medical personnel, our scientific researchers, and our diplomatic staff." The chamber erupted in shocked voices as delegates began talking over each other. Prime Counselor Thixel's form flashed through multiple colors as he struggled to process what he was hearing. "You cannot simply withdraw," Counselor Vextrus hissed, his serpentine body coiling with agitation. "There are treaties, agreements, established protocols for ending diplomatic relations." Sarah pressed the button. The device emitted a single, pure tone that resonated through the chamber's acoustics. Every human in Confederation space would receive the message within minutes. Return to Earth immediately, taking all technology and knowledge with them. "The only treaty we signed," Sarah said calmly, "was an agreement to pursue peaceful negotiations. Since you've made it clear that you view us as children in need of supervision, rather than equals worthy of partnership, those negotiations are concluded." She turned to Commander Torres, who was already gathering their materials. "Commander, please signal our transport. We're going home." As they walked toward the chamber's exit, chaos erupted behind them. Delegates were shouting questions, demanding explanations, making threats and promises in equal measure. But Sarah didn't look back. She had spent 14 months watching these beings demonstrate their arrogance and their inability to see beyond their own assumptions. At the chamber's threshold, she paused and turned back one final time. The arguing had stopped, and every eye in the chamber was fixed on her. "You might want to check your infrastructure systems," she said quietly, her words carrying clearly in the sudden silence. "All of them, before we're completely gone." Then Ambassador Sarah Chen and Commander Marcus Torres walked out of the Stellar Confederation Council chambers, leaving behind 47 species who were about to discover just how wrong they had been about humanity's importance to their civilization. The Reckoning. 3 days after the human withdrawal, chaos rippled through the Stellar Confederation like a virus spreading through a nervous system. Prime Counselor Thixel stood in his private chamber aboard Harmony 7th, his crystalline form cycling through colors that reflected his growing panic. The walls around him displayed holographic reports from across Confederation space, each one bringing worse news than the last. The first sign of disaster had come from the Kepler Transit Hub, the massive station that controlled the primary shipping lane between the core worlds and the resource-rich outer rim. Station Administrator Korvath had sent an emergency transmission just hours after the human withdrawal, his normally composed voice edged with hysteria. "The entire navigation system has gone dark," Korvath had reported, his insectoid features twitching with anxiety. "The humans didn't just leave. They took their code with them. Every quantum calculation matrix, every hyperspace trajectory algorithm, every traffic control protocol. We can't route a single ship without risking catastrophic collisions." The economic implications became apparent within hours. The Kepler Transit Hub handled over 60% of all intersector commerce, and without human-designed navigation systems, cargo ships were effectively stranded. Merchant vessels that tried to navigate the route using older Confederation technology emerged from hyperspace thousands of kilometers off course, some dangerously close to stellar hazards. Trade Representative Zelia's gills had turned a sickly gray color when she realized that human logistics software had been quietly integrated into nearly every major commercial operation in Confederation space. The efficiency improvements had been so gradual, so seamlessly implemented, that no one had realized how dependent they had become on human innovations. "They've been preparing for this," Zelia admitted to the Emergency Council session, her aquatic features reflecting the horror of her realization. Every system they improved, every process they streamlined. They built in dependencies that we never noticed. Our entire commercial infrastructure is collapsing. But the economic crisis was only the beginning. Defense Minister Korvac discovered that human military advisors had been quietly integrated into Confederation defense systems across hundreds of worlds. The humans had presented their involvement as technical support and tactical consultation, but now it became clear that they had made themselves indispensable. Admiral Vexthorn of the Zarathi Defense Fleet transmitted his report with barely controlled panic. "The targeting systems on our planetary defense networks are failing. The humans provided what they called minor software updates over the past year. Now we're discovering that those updates replaced core components of our weapons control systems. Without human technicians to maintain the code, our defensive capabilities are degrading rapidly." The medical crisis proved even more devastating. Dr. Solaris, the Confederation's chief medical officer, had initially dismissed the human withdrawal as an inconvenience. Human medical techniques were primitive, she had claimed, useful only for treating minor ailments that advanced Confederation medicine had conquered centuries ago. She changed her tune when plague outbreaks began spreading on 12 worlds simultaneously. The humans had been quietly working on these medical crises, using techniques that Confederation doctors had dismissed as crude and unsophisticated. Without human treatment protocols, diseases that had been contained for months suddenly began, spreading with devastating efficiency. The human approach to viral containment was completely different from ours, Dr. Solaris reported to the Emergency Council, her telepathic projections flickering with distress. They focused on adaptation and immune system enhancement rather than direct pathogen destruction. We thought their methods were inferior, but now we realize they were targeting aspects of these diseases that our medicine couldn't address. The plague on Thyros Prime, which had been successfully contained for 8 months under human medical supervision, exploded into a pandemic within days of the human withdrawal. Millions of beings faced death from diseases that human doctors had been quietly treating, with methods the Confederation had never bothered to understand. On the industrial world of Mechanica, power grids began failing as human-designed fusion. Reactors shut down one by one. The humans had presented their reactor improvements as simple efficiency upgrades, but Chief Engineer Korvath discovered that the upgrades had completely replaced the original Confederation systems. "They didn't just improve our reactors," Korvath reported, his mechanical voice crackling with static as his own cybernetic systems began failing without human maintenance protocols. "They rebuilt them from the ground up using principles we don't understand. Every reactor they touched is now beyond our ability to repair or maintain." The agricultural crisis hit the food-producing worlds with equal devastation. Human agricultural specialists had introduced what they called soil enhancement techniques and crop optimization protocols that had increased yields by 40% across the Confederation's farming worlds. The departure of human agricultural teams revealed that these improvements were entirely dependent on human-developed biological agents and genetic modifications. Farmer Thistle of Verdania sent desperate transmissions to the council as her crops began dying in massive swaths. "The human fertilizers weren't just fertilizers," she reported, her plant-like form wilting with stress. "They were complex biological systems that required constant adjustment and monitoring. Without human specialists to maintain the balance, our enhanced crops are reverting to their original genetic patterns. But the soil chemistry is now incompatible with their original needs." Within a week, food shortages threatened dozens of worlds as agricultural systems that had become dependent on human expertise collapsed entirely. The most shocking revelation came from Intelligence Director Cothran, whose investigation into human capabilities during their time in Confederation space revealed the extent of humanity's deception. What the Council had perceived as eager cooperation and technological sharing had actually been a comprehensive intelligence operation. "They knew everything about us," Cothran reported, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the data streams that surrounded him. Every military installation, every economic choke point, every political weakness, while we were dismissing them as naive newcomers, they were studying us with a thoroughness that puts our own intelligence services to shame. The humans had not only gathered intelligence, they had positioned themselves as indispensable to Confederation operations while simultaneously preparing for the possibility of conflict. Human technical advisors had quietly installed monitoring systems in critical facilities, human merchants had mapped every trade route and supply chain, and human medical personnel had documented the biological vulnerabilities of every Confederation species. "They've been playing a game we didn't even know existed," Cothran continued, his report growing more disturbing with each revelation. "Every favor they granted, every problem they solved, every system they improved, it was all part of a comprehensive strategy to either integrate with us as equals or to demonstrate our dependence on their cooperation." The final blow came when long-range sensors detected massive human fleets emerging from previously unknown shipyards in the outer reaches of human space. The ships were unlike anything in the Confederation databases, larger, more advanced, and present in numbers that suggested human industrial capacity far exceeded anything the Council had imagined. "We were never negotiating with a minor species seeking admission to galactic civilization," Prime Counselor Thixel finally admitted to the emergency assembly, his crystalline form flickering between colors as he struggled to maintain composure. "We were negotiating with a power that could have conquered us at any time, but chose instead to offer partnership." The revelation was devastating to the Council's understanding of their own position in the galaxy. Species that they had dismissed as primitive or irrelevant began expressing interest in human offers of alliance and cooperation. The Draenei Collective, the Free Colonies, and the Independent Systems Federation, groups that the Confederation had refused to recognize as legitimate governments, suddenly found themselves courted by humanity's diplomatic corps. Within 2 weeks of the human withdrawal, a new power block was emerging in the galaxy. Humanity was offering the smaller, overlooked species exactly what they had offered the Confederation: genuine partnership, technological cooperation, and mutual respect. The difference was that these species, having been dismissed by the Confederation, themselves recognized the value of what humanity was offering. Trade Representative Zelia's analysis of the situation was grimly prophetic. "We're watching the formation of a rival power that could eclipse the Confederation within a generation. Every species we've ignored or dismissed is now receiving human attention. Every world we considered too primitive for membership is being offered human technology and protection." The final humiliation came when Ambassador Sarah Chen transmitted a message to the Confederation Council. Her image appeared on the main display of the emergency assembly, and her expression was calm, professional, and completely unforgiving. "Honored counselors," she began, her voice carrying none of the deference that had characterized her previous communications. "The United Earth Federation wishes to inform you that we have established formal diplomatic relations with 43 independent systems and government entities. We have also negotiated mutual defense agreements with the Draenei Collective and the Free Colonies." She paused, allowing the implications to sink in before continuing. "We understand that the Stellar Confederation is experiencing some infrastructure difficulties. While we regret any inconvenience this may cause, we believe that independent, mature species should be capable of managing their own affairs without supervision." The deliberate echo of the Council's own condescending language was not lost on anyone present. "However," Sarah continued, "should the Confederation wish to discuss genuine partnership based on mutual respect and equality, we remain open to negotiation. Such discussions would need to begin with the Confederation's formal recognition of human sovereignty and our right to make our own decisions about our technological and military development." Prime Counselor Thixel realized that humanity had not simply withdrawn from negotiations. They had successfully demonstrated the consequences of the Confederation's arrogance while simultaneously building an alternative power structure that could challenge Confederation dominance. The species that had dismissed humanity as naive children had discovered that they were entirely dependent on human knowledge, human technology, and human cooperation. Meanwhile, Humanity had proven capable of building a galactic alliance that could rival the Confederation itself. As infrastructure continued to fail across Confederation space, as medical crises spread unchecked, and as economic collapse threatened entire sectors, the Council faced a choice they had never expected to make. They could swallow their pride and approach humanity as equals, or they could watch their thousand-year dominance of galactic civilization crumble around them. The age of Confederation supremacy was ending, and humanity had accomplished what no other species had managed in centuries. They had made the galaxy's most powerful alliance realize that cooperation was not weakness, and that dismissing others as inferior was a mistake that could cost them everything. The stars themselves seemed to be watching as the Stellar Confederation prepared to learn the most difficult lesson in diplomacy. Sometimes the youngest voice in the room is the one most worth hearing.